Hello, welcome to the Entrepreneurs Network. I'm Rick Anthony. Our subject today is customer experience, a popular but somewhat elusive term. The kind of thing you know when you feel it, but otherwise it's difficult to explain. My guest today, Brian Dennis, is an expert in customer experience. He has literally written the latest book, the title of which is If the Customer's Your Co-Pilot, You're in the Wrong Seat. Brian's book is a complete guide to delivering an exceptional customer experience. Brian is a Fortune 200 executive and an internationally recognized keynote speaker who has spent more than 2 decades studying what works in building and sustaining quality relationships with customers. Brian, you have 2 first names.
I do.
As do I. I've got 3 first names. It's confusing. Brian, welcome to the Entrepreneurs Network.
Thank you.
As we always do, especially with someone who is not from the area, what's your background? What's been your work experience so that you've accumulated the expertise you have in the area of customer experience?
Yeah, so thanks for having me, first of all.
Happy
and
to
I've
be
watched enough of your shows to say that I'm not from New Jersey.
And you came. You came anyway.
And I came anyways, yes. But I grew up in Chicago, on the south side of Chicago, and went to school at Illinois State University. And now live in Milwaukee. So my career has been around retail, both food retail to start, and then into apparel clothing retail in the last 15 years.
And what is there about your background that makes you an expert in customer experience?
Yeah, so
I mean, we've used, as you know, we've used phrases over the years, customer satisfaction, customer relations, CRM, et cetera, et cetera. What is this new thing called customer experience?
Yeah, so I started having this passion for delivering great service at a very young age. And I was 6 years old, and I ordered a seed packet that came in the mail, and I was always selling things. I was kind of a little entrepreneur. And I went out to sell my seeds, and there was this gentleman across the street by the name of Mr. Groshak. And Mr. Groshak was like the guy from Home Alone that lived across the street that just scared everybody. And he said, "Hey kid, come over here, what are you doing?" I said, "I'm selling seeds." And he said, "I'll buy a pack." And I said, okay, and went on doing my thing. About 3 weeks later, he comes up to me, he goes, "Hey kid, get back over here." And I said, "Yes," again, nervous. And he goes, "Those seeds you sold me didn't grow." And I didn't even think about it, but I had a dime in my pocket. So I reached into my pocket and gave him the dime. I don't know why I did it. I just knew that was probably the thing to do. Plus, I was scared. Fast forward the next year, I get my seed packet, and I'm ready to go out and hit the neighborhood. And he goes, "Hey kid, come over here." And I bring my packet over. He goes, "How many seeds do you have to sell?" I said, 200. And he goes, "I'll buy them all. You're a good businessman." And I didn't even know what it meant. I actually ran home to tell my mom, first of all, I sold all my seeds to one customer. But I didn't know what a good businessman meant. And fast forward just a little bit further along, I bought a Bazooka gum machine that didn't work, and I took it back to the store. And the gentleman gave me a hard time about returning it. He's lecturing me, you got to take better care of your stuff. But I knew that I opened up the package and it didn't work. And finally he gave me my money back, but when I walked out, I sensed that something wasn't right. And no matter what job I did after that, whether I sold knives or I worked at the beach, I did backyard carnivals, I always had this approach that the customer was really important. And I would never want any of my customers, and I called them that at that time, to feel like that. So after college, I started getting into the retail environment. I actually carried these lessons along with me. And what I learned was, it wasn't just feeling good anymore. I learned that my customers shopped my store more often, and I saw a result that sales came with that, and they were more loyal. And if we didn't have an ad item, they were much more forgiving than a customer that I didn't know. So those early lessons with the seeds and the bazooka really kind of framed my mind of how important this service piece is, and I've just kind of carried it forward ever since.
So I don't want to get tangled up in the semantics, but is therefore customer satisfaction the result of customer experience? Or are they synonymous?
They're synonymous. They're synonymous. You know, customer experience, it's not even about feeling and the item. It's really about how does the customer experience it, and how does it experience to them personally. So customer experience might be very different to you than it is to me, and the challenge for the retailer is to figure out how do we give it both to both of us.
But in all cases, the result is a satisfied customer, I think.
Yeah, and I think the challenge and what I write about in the book and what I love to talk about is a satisfied customer doesn't do it anymore. 80% of satisfied customers will defect to another brand.
Okay.
It's how do you get that satisfied customer to a highly satisfied customer?
There
And
you
sometimes it's just a little bridge, just a little thing you do. It might be the cashier that checks them out. It might be the ease of which they could order a .com item. And if you can get them to a highly satisfied customer, then they are much more loyal. So where we used to talk about satisfied customers, they'll defect. And we know from statistics, Harvard Business Review, 80% will defect if they're only satisfied. So it's not good enough anymore.
That's a higher level of sophistication, of understanding individual customers, not just a group or a cohort.
It totally is. So you look at...
and technology makes that possible.
Technology makes it possible. Data.
Yes.
Data really makes it possible. So think about Amazon, right? Amazon has the one-touch button. Amazon didn't start out with omni-channel. They started out with the customer first and worked backwards. And when you do that, then you can start to really identify what is important to that particular customer. Amazon sells 500 million items on their website, 500 million, and they add 485,000 items every single day. You could never navigate through all those items if they weren't able to personalize them to your experience, personalize it to your buying history, and personalize it through the data analytics that they know that people that buy this bought that. And now it feels like this personalized experience with 500 million items.
It's interesting because in this morning's paper there was an article that it was in the Wall Street Journal, that Procter & Gamble, the largest advertiser in the country, and perhaps the world, spends a lot of money on Facebook because of the data mining and the fact that they're able with precision to target their customers, is now backing away from that because, according to the article, they feel they've gone too far with trying to find, with a great deal of discrimination, that individual customer and that kind of alignment. They're backing off a little bit because they feel they've lost something. Am I making myself clear? Have you heard that before?
I have, and I think where it took place is you used to have newspapers, you used to have print material, and then it just swung. And I think the pendulum swung too far, and they left a lot of customers behind that aren't necessarily using that digital technology today. My mom uses Procter & Gamble products, but she doesn't use Facebook. Okay, so if you're trying to get to my mom through that, you're never going to do that. So I think what I have seen is the pendulum just swung too far, and now I think they're pulling back a little bit to say, yes, this is the space that we want to play in and we need to play in, but we can't forget about this customer, definitely our mature customer, that they still like to receive it in a different format than that. And I think that's the lesson.
And that is so often with any trend. It goes to the extreme, you have to pull back and find somewhere in the middle. This is your second book, right?
It is.
On customer experience.
It is.
Yes.
What
was the first one?
The first one was Winning at the Front Line. So the first one was really geared toward that frontline associate. So the associate actually delivers that experience. This book is kind of that next middle tier. So as you're leading teams, you're leading groups, you're speaking to your employees, this is the book that helps you do that. But the first one was all about the front line, which is just I get this smile when I talk about it because I just enjoy interacting with people and building those teams, and that's what the first one focused on. And this is just kind of that next level tier of management.
Is there another in the queue?
It could be. I got to get through this one first.
This one will be released in October, is that correct?
October 1st. This
and
gets
will be
released.
Available on Amazon?
It'll be available on Amazon Prime, Barnes & Noble. You can order it online as well as my website.
The book has a catchy title. I had to read it twice, as a matter of fact, to really better understand, I think, what you're trying to say. How did you choose the title? If the customer is your co-pilot, you're in the wrong seat. And what is the real meaning of that?
Yeah, so we looked at a lot of different titles, and we did focus groups with different groups across the country. I wanted my message to be about the customer. I wanted it to be about how do we focus on the customer and take what are sometimes complex ideas and simplify them. And that's what this book does. That was the intention. And when we finally, the dust settled, this is the title that we believe said, it's about the customer, and then we built the book and the framework around the book around that topic.
I noticed you dedicated the book to your mother. What was there about Mom that inspired you to write the book?
Yeah,
Maybe more than just the book.
Yeah, I wouldn't say Mom inspired me to write the book. Mom inspired me to do what I've done in business, and all of her kids. My mom is amazing. She had 6 of us, 6 brothers and sisters. And most of the time as a single parent. After she had us, she went back to college to further her career. She never had a college education, and then ultimately had an incredibly successful career at Pepsi in their HR department. So she did all this amazing stuff, but it's the way she did it that was just amazing. She had the most integrity during good times and bad. She never wavered, and she always did it in the right way. Extremely giving back and extremely passionate about her people. You know, when they did some downsizing at Pepsi, you know, she fought hard for her people, and if they couldn't keep them there, she moved them to another spot. But you know, the 6 of us kids, we get together. We're like, you know, how are we ever going to be like Mom? She's just an incredible integrity, and has just taught us all so much. I really appreciate you asking.
That's
that.
a nice story. I figured there had to be a story behind that.
Yeah, just an amazing person.
As you know better than I, an awful lot has been written about customer experience. There are webinars and college curriculum courses and so on. What's new? What's different? And what's different about this book as compared to all of the others on the subject of customer experience?
Yeah, so when I set out to write this book, I tried to model it after the speaking and the keynotes that I give, or I'm talking to a conference. And I try to share with the group stories, and I try to share with the group real world examples, so they can relate whatever it is that they're trying to achieve with maybe a story that I tell. And while I enjoy selling books, I get much greater satisfaction from an attendee that comes back a year later and says, you know what, Brian, I remember what you said about this. And it related to a story that I told them. So I've always tried to make sure that, you know, when I'm speaking or talking to a group and I have that privilege, that I'm not going to give you 10 or 25 things to remember, but I want you to walk away with 1 or 2 that you take back. And if you've done that, I think I've succeeded. So I've kind of taken that approach, and I said, well, what if I put that in written form? And what if I assemble that in a book? So anybody can pick this up, read something that's complex, whether it's digital or the transformation or innovation, and really understand it and apply it to their business. And I think that's what makes this book different. And I hope they enjoy it.
Your first chapter deals with change. We have that in common in that I wrote a little missive myself a few years ago, and my first chapter was on change. It seems to me a logical starting point for almost anything these days. Trying to understand it, anticipate it, manage it, direct it, etc. What's the significance of change in your epistle here on the customer experience?
I wanted to talk about change before I talked about anything else in the book.
Is it the nature of change or change in retail?
I think it's the nature of change and the flexibility to change, and even more than the flexibility to change, the willingness to change, right? So anybody can say, we're going to deliver this new initiative, but unless you have the entire team on board, it's very difficult to do. They say the only change that doesn't happen is in a cemetery, right? Although I would argue, and even cemeteries are changing their model in terms of how they engage. But when I think of change, it's really about, let me give you an example. I see the same doctor every year for my annual physical, and I like seeing this doctor because he yells at me once a year, right? So I go back year after year, and this time when I went in for my physical, he comes in with an iPad. And I said, Dr. T, you have an iPad. Oh, this damn thing, right?
Yeah.
You could tell he just wasn't happy about having to have
I have the same doctor.
The iPad, yes. But when I asked him, I said, well, what was my blood pressure at my last exam? But if I would have asked him that question a year ago, he would have had to have gotten his assistant to go out to get my file. And literally, he had this right at his fingertips. I said, Dr. T, that's great. You got it right here. So, you know, I think change, obviously, he didn't fully buy in yet, and I'm hoping he will by my next appointment. But you got to make sure that there's a willingness when you decide to change. Otherwise, sometimes you can give technology and it doesn't go anywhere.
That's a very interesting point, because although I agree with you, technology can enhance the quality of the service, etc. On the other hand, the complaint, I don't want to go off on a tangent, but the complaint I hear and the complaint I have is that they walk in with their little device, they sit down, their heads are down most of the time. They're not looking at you, they're not watching you, they're not watching for signs, they're not reading body language. They're so damn focused on what the government now requires them to do, which is to record everything about the visit.
Yeah.
Talk about going to an extreme.
Yeah.
And so once again, we have to find some middle ground so that this tool is really helpful rather than taking over the experience.
Yeah, my brother-in-law is an ER doc, and he fights that same piece.
Yeah.
You know, he used to be able to talk to his patients, even in the ER room, and really understand them.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, because of the regulation, and some of them maybe for the right reasons, he doesn't have the time to do that anymore. So part of that frustration is he used to have a better understanding of the patient and could better diagnose, but by the time you get through all these steps you have to do, there's very little time to do that. So it is a challenge, and I think we're going to have to figure that out.
It's going to become more of an issue, I think, particularly as behavioral is recognized as an integral part of medicine and treatment. And so you're going to have to observe, you're going to have to watch, not just go by the numbers.
Yeah.
At any rate, that's, again, a whole other story.
Yeah.
On the other hand, there is a thing, as you very well know, called patient experience.
Yeah.
A whole other field that's growing up, largely because of new regulations. In a recent article you wrote about omni-channel, you said omni-channel is dead. I don't know, what does it mean?
Yeah, right, and that's exactly why it's dead. What does it mean? And I got a lot of feedback on that, both good and not so good. But omni-channel is dead. It's an unrealistic expectation. It's not a path that customers shop. Customers don't shop omni-channel. They just shop.
Describe it.
Yeah.
Define it.
Yeah. So omni-channel would be like setting up a business where you're going to sell on .com, you're going to sell in a store, you're going to sell via digital, via the mobile device. But when they set this up, and many times they set it up all at once, and it's equivalent of building a house, the foundation and the roof at the same time. You can't do that. You need a blueprint, you need a foundation, and you need to build it structurally. It's how Amazon started out with the one-touch button, as I mentioned earlier. And as these organizations start to look at this omni-channel approach, it's very, very difficult to deliver that unless you put the customer lens first. So let me give you an example. Your Acme Market, your local grocery store here, probably has 50 to 60,000 items in there. Catalina Marketing will tell you 99.3% of customers don't notice 99% of those items in there.
Right.
They don't care. They either pass them, they don't look at them, or they don't care about them. So you've got 50 to 60,000 items in there that mean nothing to that customer, right? So as you think about what does omni-channel mean, it's really going to be interesting, because what Amazon is able to give you digitally online, as I look down the road, the customer's going to expect that same experience in the store. They don't want to pass 50,000 items in the store. They just want the ones that are most important to them. And the brick and mortar retailers that can figure that out will be at a far greater advantage as we go down the road.
Yeah, well, one option is don't bring them into the store. Instead, find out what they want and you ship it to them. Amazon, the Amazon model again.
And it might eventually evolve to that. So maybe it's not a 80,000 square foot Acme store. It might be a 30,000 square Acme store with maybe a 20,000 foot in the back that just ships.
Wasn't it Sears several years ago that experimented with that? Instead of the big box store with the millions of items, coming down to something that's more manageable, more community centered, and with fewer items, not just tools, but just fewer items.
Yes.
I thought I saw something
Yeah,
like that.
and there's been several examples like that. One recent example I saw is just think of the cereal aisle. The cereal aisle is about 80 feet long.
Confusing.
And several supermarkets have shrunk that, almost in half, and they actually sold more. So how can you sell more cereal out of less space? And the reason is the customer could more easily identify the one that they want, right? And that's the personalized experience. That's the omni-channel that it's going to look like as we go forward.
Okay, I got it. Brian, we met through a mutual friend, Dr. Mohammed Latib, who recently started a new venture of his own, CX University, which is an online training program to teach people about the elements, the principles of the customer experience. I think you were one of the first members of Mohammed's Excellence Board as well. What do you know about CX University, and why is the timing right for something like CX University?
Yeah, Mohammed is, first of all, just an amazing man. I call him the Dos Equis man. He's the most interesting man in the world. He has done so much over his life. So just as a personal fan, I just think he's an amazing person and a person that gives a lot back. But what I really like about CX University and what Mohammed's leading there is it's really innovating that space around the customer experience. And it's not just for the first-time manager that's learning about CX. It's a phenomenal refresher course for anybody out there that delivers that customer experience. And he's not relying on this is how we used to do it. He's actually setting the trend of what should that experience look like, not only today, but what does it look like down the road, and doing it through curriculum and choices that that they can take. And it's been an amazing venture.
He spent, as you very well know, he spent a big chunk of his career as an educator, so I guess he's fallen it back into his niche.
Yeah,
as
and
an
he's
educator.
just tremendously talented at it, and the board, excluding myself, it's just the most amazing assembly of talent around CX. Entrepreneurs all come at it with a different lens that has just built this CX University. That's it's going to be really something.
You mentioned entrepreneurs. Why should entrepreneurs read your book, and what would you expect them to get from it?
Yeah.
So, true entrepreneurs, startups, early stage, hanging by their fingernails to some reality that they've created.
Yeah. The entrepreneurs, as I think of the entrepreneurs that I get to meet on a pretty regular basis, they're doers, right? And I think sometimes it's okay to look at something that somebody's already done for you, right? And I think there's lessons in here, no matter what the field is you're in. If you're an entrepreneur and you're starting up, wherever point you're at on the journey, I think there's some lessons in here that can help you, because you just can't know it all. There's just too much going on right now to know it all. So it's really tough for a doer to stop and read something like that. But I've heard somebody once say, "You are what you read," and I just think there's some things in there that'll help them, especially if they're looking to innovate and to stay ahead of the curve.
But as you study the innovators in customer experience, is there a single characteristic, something that really is distinguishing out of all of the other variables that you've written about, you talk about? Is there a single thing that stands out?
Great question. I think there's a couple of traits, and then I think there's a single thing. I think the couple of traits are they build great teams. They've got great people. They take care of their associates, and their associates love delivering great service as a result of that. I think that's a key trait. I think if you're looking for the one thing that stands out, it's probably the word empathy. It's probably the word where you can put yourself in the customer's shoes. I'll give you an example. There's a gentleman that lives near me in Milwaukee by the name of Doug Dietz, and Doug works for GE, and he spent 2 years of his life building this MRI machine. And if you think about it, if you had an MRI, it's a huge machine. The room can be incredibly intimidating.
Yes.
You got the big warning label on there before you go in, and they were really focusing on children in an MRI machine, and of course there's that noise. And he spent 2 years and finally went out to the location where they put this MRI machine, and they said, "Mr. Dietz, you have to leave. We have a child coming in to have an MRI." And he just walked outside the MRI room, and he saw the child coming down with their parents. And he could see the child was crying, and he could see the child was scared and upset. And he heard the father say, "Hey, we talked about this," and it just kind of pained him to see this. And then as the child went into the MRI room, and they had to sedate the child. About 80% of the children,
Is that
prior to what I'm going to share with you in a second, were sedated before they went into the MRI machine. But he watched their parents as the child was in there, and he's like, what have I done? There's something wrong with this experience. It shouldn't be like this. So he was noticeably upset, visibly upset, personally upset, and he went back out and he said, "I'm going to do something about this." So he took his design to a daycare, and he just let them start coloring like what it could be and what it could look like. And he came back with this different versions. Some of them are castles. Some of them have different light inside. He added aromatherapy where there's this lavender smell. You don't have the big, large warning labels. So he created all these different versions of the MRI, especially for children. A couple things happened as a result of that. First of all, the amount of sedation went down to 2%, something incredibly noticeable. So they didn't have to sedate the kids anymore. And not only did they not have to sedate the children anymore, they could do a lot more MRIs because they could get them through. So, and their patient satisfaction went up to 94%. So that is a gentleman who felt this empathy, said something's not right with this customer experience because he saw it, he felt it, he lived it, and he came back and changed that experience.
But the opening itself, the noise, et cetera, none of that changed. Is that correct?
The noise didn't change, but what the education around what the noise is made it fun.
Yes.
And here was the game changer. When a child walked out, one of the ones he witnessed, the child turned to their parent and said, "Dad, can we do this again tomorrow?"
Wow.
That was the game changer, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't look like a big hole anymore. It might look like a tire of a bus. And he managed to make it as fun as an MRI could be. But when that child turned back and said that, he knew I did it. That's empathy. That's when you can understand, live it in the customer's shoes, and make a difference.
I've got one for adults who need to be sedated. Seriously. Well, my wife and I had to have an MRI, and we both hate them. She more than I. She's claustrophobic. But we found one that is vertical.
Yeah.
You can sit in the machine. There are 2 panels on either side. Or you can lay down on the machine, but you don't go through this long tube.
Yeah.
It was a miracle. Interestingly, none of the people we talked to at any of the hospitals, any of the other providers, would even tell us about this place.
Yeah, it costs a lot more. I had soldiers.
No, it doesn't cost that much more.
No.
No.
Okay. Oh, wow.
I mean, the physician said, well, the image isn't as clear as you get with the other MRIs.
Okay.
It did the job.
Yeah.
And it was a good experience. So much so that we've told many, many other people
that's
about
great.
it. So it
That's
must have
great.
been a good experience.
Fantastic.
In the chapter "Death by 1,000 Paper Cuts," you discuss at length the irritants and things that get in the way of making customers a good customer experience. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, so those are the little things, right? The little things that kind of get in the way. I'll give you a reason.
Is it autobiographical?
Some of it is. In fact, I'll make it really autobiographical. My rental car, the company I usually get my rental car, was sold out, so I had to use another company. And it wasn't even 10 miles from where I picked it up at the airport, and the engine oil light comes on the car, right? I was at the hotel this morning, and the shampoo and conditioner are out by the sink, and why aren't they in the shower where you take the shower, right? So I think as businesses start to think about what are these irritants that get in the way from fully experiencing it, you can just much better position your customer to have a better experience. So it's just those irritatable.
Yeah. I got a quick story for you.
Yeah.
You'll love this. Big retailer. My wife and I saw something. There were stools she wanted to buy. We went to the store. We hadn't been in the store for a very long time. Couldn't find them. Asked the young sales lady. She couldn't find them. She called her supervisor, who found what we were looking for, helped us select the color we were looking for, walked us up to the checkout counter to be sure we got the sale price, sold us a credit card, a store card while we were there. My wife and I, they're good buddies now. I think they're going to have lunch. It was a really good experience. What started out though, it's disappointing. It's aggravating. These false advertising. They have it in this flyer, but it's not here. It's not in the store. Yeah. She just turned the whole thing around.
Oh, that's great.
I don't know if she got anything extra for that. Yeah. We said if there's a form, we'd like to give you a commendation for the service you provided. It happened quite recently.
Yeah. And sometimes it's as simple as that, but I'm guessing you left there highly satisfied. It
Absolutely.
didn't start out that way.
Absolutely.
But when you left, you said, you know what, that person got it, and that was a pretty great experience.
I became less satisfied when I tried to put the stool together.
Yeah.
And they didn't send the right screws, etc.
Oh, Lord.
Yeah, oh well. Yeah. The book is, if the customer's the co-pilot, you're in the wrong seat. I don't think you answered my question. What's the impetus for the title, co-pilot?
Yeah, so it's about, if the customer's the co-pilot, you're in the wrong seat, meaning the customer needs to be in the pilot seat. The customer needs to be driving everything you do, everything you think about, everything you're thinking about doing. It starts with that conversation. I don't care what the topic is you're having around, whether it's finance, whether it's initiative. It all comes back to how is this going to impact the customer. And if you start there, if you start the journey there, you'll be much more successful by the time you roll it out.
One quick question before we have to sign off. Is customer experience different for each cohort, older people, younger people, gender differences, ethnic differences, different tunes for each of those differences?
I think the expectations of those different tunes are different. How you deliver it,
Yes.
many times can be the same way.
Same.
So you know, maybe the more mature customer might not be using digital or mobile,
Yeah.
but they do want a lot of the same things that young emerging millennial wants. They just go at it in different ways.
Yeah.
But the systems you build, the processes you put in place, should satisfy both of those, and they can if you do it right.
You just touched a nerve based on some research for some of the startups that I've been involved in. And the word is respect. It comes back from focus groups. Treat me with respect.
Yeah.
Regardless of age, regardless of gender, treat me with respect. And in the absence of that, it's not going to be a very good experience.
Yeah, yeah. Treat me with respect and treat me like you know me, right?
Yeah.
And if you can get to that where it feels like this company knows
Yes.
me, you want to do
Yeah.
business with that company. That's the magic.
The book again is If the Customer is the Co-Pilot, You're in the Wrong Seat by Brian Dennis. It will be available on Amazon and your website.
And website as well.
Which I think is up on the screen, or will be, or should be, or has been.
Yeah.
What is the website?
It's briandenisspeaker.com.
Okay, and it's Dennis with two N's.
Two N's. Two
Okay.
N's. Two
Thank you very
first
much for
names.
being
Thank
here.
you. I
it
enjoyed
very
this.
much. Until next time, this is the Entrepreneurs Network. Take very good care of yourselves.